This was a video that was sent to me by our very own Kelly P. She's a mod over here. Shout out to Kelly P, the mod.
Come on.
And this is Christian Lavelli. I don't know a ton of her stuff, but she talks about therapy and trauma and suffering. And this is not an endorsement of all of her views because I don't know everything she believes. But this video sent to me by Kelly P, and it reminded me of something that Michael Tate and those folks kind of were advocating and making it super popular. Okay. This is probably you're probably a little too young for this, but I remember this. Go ahead and play this video.
I was old. I had Rebecca St. James in my Walkman. That's a Walkman. DC Talk, Jesus Freaks book on my nightstand, and a deeply unhealthy relationship with the idea of dying for Jesus.
Pause it. Do you remember the Jesus?
You told me about this. It's the Jesus Freaks. It's the book about the martyrs and how all the apostles died for Jesus. Pretty awesome.
And so this was massive. They put out multiple versions of this Jesus Freak.
That's pretty hardcore.
Book around the song Jesus Freak, and it was all about martyrs.
I mean, that's pretty hardcore. I think that's what, that's why we're losing people to orthodoxy now, because Protestants aren't pressing into our roots of dying for Jesus.
I don't know why she played this. I think this is the...
I pledge allegiance.
It was a little intense, especially for a girl that looked like that. Then Columbine happened. She said yes happened. And
I remember that.
You remember this?
I remember the whole if a man walks into the building and he puts a gun to your face, are you denying Jesus?
So that Columbine story made it into one of the Jesus Freak books.
Come on, somebody.
And
pretty
dark.
Wasn't it also, was it true?
I think it was true. I think there was a young lady that was a Christian, and she was asked about her faith, and so the story goes.
I like how the she said yes bit sounds a lot like a proposal.
It does.
She said yes to the dress. She said yes.
It's way darker than that. Yeah. So this is interesting. No, go ahead.
Suddenly, every Christian kid in America was preparing for their martyrdom arc. Like it was a rite of passage. I wasn't just willing to die for Jesus. I wanted to die for Jesus. My journal pages are filled.
My dream hasn't come true yet. I want to die for Christ. Okay, wait. Is that real?
This is her journal. According to her, this is her journal.
So Jesus Freaks, DC Talk make like little Christian jihadists?
Okay, well, hold on.
I mean, that is pretty...
Hold on.
My dream, if that was translated from like a little scrabble from the Quran, my dream hasn't come true yet. I want to die for Christ. We would be like, wow, they're crazy.
Hold on. Okay, so here's
a Middle Eastern scrabble.
You're really going hard in the paint. I know. So I think this is not the same thing as a jihadi. Okay, you're wildin'. Two, I do think that this was not their intent. I think their intent was to put together something that would empower people to understand the martyrs that came before us, who died for the faith. I think that the issue, twofold, the stories of the martyrs, which, by the way, Dr. Sean McDowell just did his dissertation on this. He did a video on this. Maybe we'll react to it. And not all of the disciples died as martyrs. There are some that for sure died as martyrs. There are some that likely died as martyrs, and there are some that we don't know about, and there are some that died as natural causes. So we don't know. The thing is, I think they were trying to tell these stories. The issue was their audience was young, and in telling these stories, you kind of romanticized the idea of being a martyr. Instead
of just living a life for Jesus.
Instead of, hey, let's empower you to live a life to honor the Lord with what you have in front of you.
So I wonder if everyone in practice was like kind of hostile. Were they hostile a little bit?
No.
No,
they weren't hostile.
I wonder if they were like, what? I like Jesus.
You already feel like the world's against you as a teenager.
Yeah.
Right? Think about that. Think about that psychologically.
It's like the David Goggins bit.
Yes, which we're going to get to. You already feel like everyone's against you.
Yeah.
Now you add the fact that you're a Christian, which comes with some degree of being ostracized.
Yeah.
Now add the layer of like someone actually lost their life
in that era.
And Columbine.
Yeah.
Then add the layer of like, and now there's a book that kind of is romanticizing this and is primarily targeted towards teenagers.
And then the daggone towers fell.
Then the towers.
And then there's a lot of emotionalism around this time.
Yes.
That's
crazy. Play the rest of our video.
With the prayers of a little girl who wanted to die. So I wrote my goodbye letters, and I imagined my altar call funeral and all of the hundreds of thousands of people that would be saved because of my prolific life of faith. I thought if I couldn't be the perfect Christian kid, the least I could do is die dramatically. For Jesus.
Wow.
And then I spent most of my life waiting for God to collect on the vow I made to him as a kid. To die. And as it turns out, I was wrong about all of it. I wrote a letter to evangelical martyrdom syndrome. You can read it here. Link is.
So she wrote a whole letter to evangelical martyrs. Oh, now shout out to Kristen. She, again, her thing is she's talking a lot about not poverty, a lot about suffering, a lot about the stuff that she's gone through in some of her writing. I'm not very familiar with it, and shout out to Kelly P for sending this. So here lies the tension.
Yeah.
What stories are we telling as Christians? Right?
Hello.
What stories are we telling as Christians? Again, there's one extreme where the highest virtue slides people into a degree of the prosperity gospel. Like if you believe in Jesus, your life would be peaches.
Yeah.
But there's another extreme that the stories you're telling Christians that are inspiring is of people who are dying as martyrs.
Hello.
So then she's ready to go. She's ready to go. So what impact psychologically is this having on young people where you're telling this? And I remember this era. Like I remember this era, and I remember telling my mom about this book and like being super inspired by it. You know what I mean? Thankfully, by the grace of God, I always had other things I was interested in. I always understood that God wanted to use me to usher in goodness and beauty and something better than what the world is offering.
Yeah.
Right? Through whatever means that I have in front of me. You know? And I think that it's startling that this was put out by the biggest Christian band. Like if we're doing an internal critique of evangelical culture, it's kind of wild.
Kind of missed the mark a little bit.
Kind of missed the mark a little bit in targeting it to young people. If you're targeting it to older folks, people who are into
parents
maybe, to young people though, you know, and not to pivot here, but a lot of this mentality is why I'm speaking on the topic of godly ambition.
Come on, somebody.
Because I think if you're here now, God wants to use you to usher in goodness and to be faithful with our resources now.
Yes.
Right? Our time, our talent, our treasure, our things that are entrusted to us. And so that is the theme of godly ambition, is how do we do our best to be faithful with what's right in front of us, right? If you're a Patreon, we actually sent some of this out to you guys, the early copy for those of you guys that are on Goodreads. But everybody else, you could actually pre-order it right now for $23.98 and get the first chapter. We're working on getting you the first couple chapters at mygodlyambition.com. So you can go to Amazon, you can go to Barnes & Noble, go to mygodlyambition.com, submit your receipt, get the first couple chapters early. And I think, hopefully, my heart is to combat some of this romanticizing of unnecessary martyrdom and unnecessary suffering. Suffering is sanctifying. Suffering because you're an idiot, or suffering because you punted your life, or suffering because you romanticize the wrong stories is unnecessary. And I think there's an aspect where we suffer and it's consecrating and it's sanctifying, but then there's an aspect where we suffer because we have allowed ourselves to buy into false narratives.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think those are helpful. Also, I got to let you guys know, I don't know if you guys know, but you can now watch our podcast, our full podcast, on the Spotify and the Apple Podcast app. So if you didn't know, go over there, make sure you're following Ruslan KD, and leave a review, because we're really trying to drop great podcast over there with long form guests and all that sort of stuff. So make sure you're following us on the Spotify and the Apple Podcast app. All right. See you over there.